Hey, what's up everybody? Jasper here. Today we're diving into something that brings a whole new wave of innovation to the industrial automation world. Ignition 8.3 is here, and it's not just an update, it's a game changer. There are big changes all across the platform. There's a lot of stuff to cover here, but I'll keep it as condensed as possible. We got two major updates and two big new features. The first update we got is the gateway UI is being completely redesigned. It's not just better looking, it's really optimized to work seamlessly at a large scale. The UI is clean, the navigation is smooth, and they added a global search. It can search menus, but it can also search resources like databases or machine devices and so on. That sounds absolutely great. And it's not just visually that everything has changed. On stage, they explained how the file system of Ignition completely got overhauled. It's now working with JSON files to store every setting on the gateway and every resource configuration, which makes it very accessible to do Git integration, so you can start versioning the gateway config itself. And next to that, everything from the gateway is now an API. So every action we normally do manually is now also possible to do with an API. So that will really help a lot with Kubernetes implementations, and this will open more and more options for automatic deployments and maybe even third-party gateway managers. Perspective was not left out of the prizes. It got three new big features. It got drawing tools, forms, and offline mode. So, drawing tools. Drawing tools is like having your own SVG drawer built into the Perspective Designer, which is quite good for building SCADA-like systems in a browser. It's really useful to have SVGs. We used to be doing stuff like that through external tools like Inkscape, but I'm really curious how good the internal SVG drawer will be and if it's possible to keep something like Inkscape out of the workflow. The second one for Perspective is forms. So doing forms in Perspective always feels like a bit like reinventing the wheel over and over. But now form is a component like another component, which is configurable in JSON, and it has events for submission and auto scaling for mobile. So it also has constraints that can be checked inside the browser, so your user will get instant feedback from the form when it's giving in something that it's not supposed to. So I think that's pretty useful. Last but not least for Perspective is the offline mode, where you can open your apps with no connection to the gateway. So of course your bindings won't work or update, but what will work is the new forms component. So people can open their Perspective app and fill in an entire form and submit it, and the moment they have gained connection back to the gateway, the form will be sent through some sort of a queuing mechanism. The all-new Power Historian, as they called it on stage. The new Historian exists of two parts. You have the Historian API and you have the new internal Ignition Historian. The API change is actually quite a big upgrade, and I think it was not clear for everybody the change between the API and the change with the internal Ignition Historian. If you did not get a change in the API, I challenge everybody to go in their current 8.1 system and create a view with PowerChart, then request a tag that changes every few seconds. Now put your history range to 6 months and watch your ignition suffer. Aggregation happened after querying. So you'll be getting thousands or even millions of data points into your ignition system and then do the aggregation. The thing that's new with the new API is that it's possible now to do the aggregation on the historian side. This way you will get way less traffic and way less points to ignition, and you'll be able to use the historians where they are good at, and that is querying and storing a lot of data. So that will be a big win for module builders as well, trying to build a very smooth experience with historians. The second part of the story is that Inductive Automation used their new historian API and they built a historian with the API themselves. So they were using QuestDB, which is an open source historian. Actually, QuestDB is claiming to be as 5 times as fast on ingestion as TimescaleDB and InfluxDB, and also querying, they claim to beat them. From what I understood, QuestDB is currently only usable on the same server as the gateway. So there is no option for that as an external historian right now, but I'm curious on how they will release it. There was nothing set in stone for that part. A big new feature is event streams. Event streams basically means something has happened in my enterprise and I want to listen to that and take action on it. So this can be within Ignition, but most importantly, we can now also listen to other things happening in the organization. And they implemented event streams like this. You pick a source. For now they have Kafka, HTTP, Logger, database, script, gateway events and gateway messages. And they were committed to add tags, MQTT, Ignition events, Amazon SQS, Azure Queue Storage and Azure Service Bus. The second step is you encode your event to get your right data type. Then there is a filter step, which is actually nice because it's just a script which you can use to filter the events coming in, and you can filter out events that you don't want to take action on. Then the next step is you transform your event so you can form it in the format that you would like to use. And next is the event handler itself, which allows you to take action. And you have the same options as the sources, but I think for me the most interesting one is doing some scripting with it. For example, you get a message on Kafka and you want to store that in your database. Most of those use cases will be very common. And then also a nice added value is they have after event handler, there is an error handler script. So if something goes wrong in your event handling, you now can also then trigger the script for error handling and do something when an event came and you could not process it. For example, you can store it somewhere and come back to it later. And then as a bonus for event streams, you get a test mode. You can actually treat your sources, or you can use your sources without actually being connected to a source. So that's a nice feature, I think. All by all, I think event streaming is a nice feature, but I would like to have seen a bit more control on how these event subscriptions work. So what would have been nice is actually having full access to the code libraries, so you have more control over your implementations. But I get it, Ignition is supposed to be approachable for IT and OT and everybody, not only developers. So it has to be approachable, so I get the change. Okay, we've gotten this far and I promised to keep the video condensed. So here comes some of the minor new feature, but to be honest, they're also quite good. Each gateway will have a deployment mode, which could be dev, staging, production. and each of the gateway configuration changes being made on dev will not get deployed to changing. Well, the settings will be deployed, but each of the gateway will know that it's staging and only has to use the settings used for staging or for production. This way you will be able, for example, to have on your development server, you will have simulated devices, and on your production server, you will have connection to real devices. So deploying will be way easier to contain. There is a Siemens driver upgrade to S7 Plus, so you will now have browsable tags for those kind of PLCs. Partial export of gateway settings will be possible, like you could in Perspective when you export just a few views or a few scripts. Now you can also do that in the gateway. So you can export some of the device configurations and just a few and import them in a new gateway. And since Ignition's folder structure is now JSON, so it's readable, Ignition has now its own secret manager, and it has the abilities to store its own secrets like passwords for your databases, but it also has the ability to use an external third-party secret manager. For example, they mentioned Vault on the stage. And last but not least, we now have alarm aggregation on UDT and folders. This will be much easier to determine all the tags under a production line, how many errors, how many alarms do we have, what is the highest alarm on that. That will be far easier now to come to, because you will not have to calculate it anymore. That's definitely a practical feature. So that is Ignition 8.3. It's a massive step forward in the industrial automation software. From smoother upgrades and enhanced security to powerful new tools and integration. It's clear that inductive automation is really pushing the industry forward. If you're in the industry and you're using Ignition, this is definitely an upgrade you cannot afford to ignore. Whether you are a developer, an engineer, a decision maker, Ignition 8.3 offers something that can streamline your operations and future-proof your systems. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be useful or helpful, please consider subscribing and let me know in the comments what you think of the new Ignition 8.3 release, and I'll catch you in the next one.